Asa. I am 6 years old and I do drag.
Asa is a baby drag queen.
He started doing this 4, 5, now 6 years old. He is by far the youngest performer we've seen.
There's even adult performers that sometimes we can outperform.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is the next RuPaul.
Did anyone think to ask if this was age appropriate? Anyone? Are we just letting kids do whatever they want with no parenting at all? Or are these kids actually being used as a means to an end to fulfill some kind of weird fantasy of the adults around them? But maybe there's something I'm not seeing.
What do you think the biggest misconception of Asa and what he's doing is?
Well, I think there's a few. People who don't like what we believe can sometimes be violent.
I love the way that Vice edited this. The interviewer asks, "What do you think the biggest misconception is?" Followed by, "Well, there's a few misconceptions. People don't like us." Good job, Vice. Excellent way to start the video with a non-answer. Eventually, they do answer the question over 10 minutes later at the end of the documentary, after their critics have already been demonized as unreasonable. They say, "A misconception is that our son is being forced to do this." While that does sound like a reasonable argument because maybe some people are saying that force is a factor, in reality, this is actually a straw man argument because force is not the main concern from critics. The main concern is that kids are being manipulated into willingly doing inappropriate stuff like this by adults who are creepy. With that said, this interview is from a Vice series called Child's Play. It features Aaron and Jenn and their 6-year-old son, Asa, who does drag. While Vice appears to portray this family favorably by labeling all critics as hate mobs without showing their arguments, this whole situation begs the question of why? I have no problem with people identifying with or being a part of the LGBT community, but if you want to do things like drag dancing on stage, why can't you just wait till you're older? What's so urgent? Why do kids have to be exposed to and participate in drag? More importantly, how does a 6-year-old even know what this stuff is?
One of Asa's favorite pastimes since he was a toddler was dancing.
He would watch a lot of Kids Bop videos, and then we noticed that he's trying to do the dances that they're doing in the music videos.
I was fully unaware that Kids Bop was still a thing. I thought that brand died in the 2000s. Despite that, what you'll see happen throughout this video is that Jenn and Aaron are very dishonest in the way they portray what they're doing. Clearly, they are used to pushback and have scripted responses to common objections that people have to their behavior. So they start the conversation by saying, "This isn't anything strange. He was just dancing along to Kids Bop videos. What's wrong with dancing?" Now that his behavior has been portrayed as innocent because obviously there isn't anything inherently wrong with most forms of stage dancing like tap, ballet, or breakdancing, but there's a difference between stuff like that and stuff that is not child-friendly like pole dancing or twerking. That being said, how do we go from Kids Bop to drag?
I would say the real conversation about drag started the first time that he went to Pride with us.
The first time that we took any of our kids to Pride, Asa was 4. You thought it would be a good way to bring our kids in and let them see the diversity of the world around us. The music came on for the main stage. Asa was like, "What's that music? I want to know," and grabbed me by the hand, and there was a drag performance going on. He's just sat there kind of watching in awe, and he turned to me and said, "Could I do that?"
You took your 6-year-old son to a Pride parade at 4 years old? Why the hell would you take a young child to Pride? Pride parades are about celebrating sexuality, and a 4-year-old does not need to be learning about sexuality or diversity in a place where people are displaying kinks. In fact, a 4-year-old should know nothing about sex. Contrary to what a lot of people still seem to believe, kids are not tiny adults. You can't expose them to certain information until they get older because that information is traumatizing to them, and they'll develop pathological behaviors in adulthood like addiction if they're exposed to certain stuff too early. Stop exposing kids to the adult world. It's not good for them. I mean, I can't even show a lot of the stuff that commonly goes on at Pride parades on YouTube without getting penalized, so I can't imagine why it's legal to publicly display things like sexual kinks out on the street where everyone can see it. I mean, these are some very irresponsible parents.
I was still kind of new to the concept of the LGBTQ community. I'd never really been exposed to it, never been around it.
Yeah, I don't believe that at all. There's no way this guy is straight. Even the people in the comments agree. But you're a terrible liar, Aaron, and even if you are being honest, it's still irresponsible to take your kids to Pride. It would be like, gee, I've never been to a nightclub before, but I thought I would take my kids there so they could experience diversity in people's behaviors and learn about intoxication. This whole feigning ignorance thing they're doing is ridiculous.
I'm all about our family being allies, but It never occurred to me that we'd be a part of that community at this point in our lives.
It never occurred to you? You literally brought a 4-year-old impressionable child to the event. The only reason he knows about this stuff is because you were very forward about exposing your kids to diversity, and when the 4-year-old kid said, "Can I try drag dancing?" instead of saying, "No, that's for adults," you asked him if he wanted a dress.
Following that, for the next year, Asa was just obsessed with drag. And so the conversations led to, would Asa ever want to wear a dress?
Did Asa say he wanted a dress, or did you ask him if he wanted a dress? Because if you asked him if he wanted a dress, that's you leading him into the behavior and not a natural proclivity because he likes kids bop dances. Also, were you continuously exposing him to RuPaul? Are you allowing him to view content on TV that's not age appropriate? Or was he asking to watch drag shows so much that you just couldn't possibly bear it? Because it seems a lot more likely to me that he was led into this stuff in the disguise of exposing him to diversity instead of naturally desiring it. Their whole game plan is to make it look like they are good and supportive parents by saying, well, we're just doing what he wants, when in reality, they're actively pushing their kid towards drag, or at the very least, they're ignoring the fact that kids want to do things that are bad for them all the time, and it's a parent's job to say no.
He said to me one day, I am going to go put on my dress and I am going to sing and you're going to video me and put me on Facebook so everybody can give me likes.
And the answer to that request should be no. You're a child and this is not appropriate for a child. Stop publicly posting pictures of your kids online. That's how creeps get access to them. I mean, this is so bad. Some parent thought it was a good idea to film their 5-year-old daughter doing a squat from the back and put it on Instagram. I don't think YouTube will let me get away with showing the comments, but needless to say, there were a lot of people in the comment section that should be in jail. If you post your kid dancing in drag, you're going to attract this kind of audience as well. But as I said, though they won't admit to it, it's clear that Aaron and Jenn are pushing their son Asa into drag by rewarding it with praise and attention.
It was a year after their first performance. I took him to go perform. It was an amazing performance.
Wow, that crowd cheered very loudly after he removed his cape. Interesting. What do you call it when a person is praised for removing clothing while dancing and then receives money for their performance from the audience? Nobody sees a problem with this? After seeing that Asa wanted to upload a drag video to Facebook for likes, and then seeing the massive amount of attention that he gets from crowds, nobody is concerned that he is merely engaging in this because of how much praise he's receiving? The amount of gaslighting here is just ridiculous.
If he was a girl doing these exact same things, no one would be saying anything.
Are you kidding? It absolutely would not be fine. In fact, leftists have rightfully been screaming about child beauty pageants for years, where similar behavior occurs with little girls.
I mean, this actually is a perfect representation of the whole, like, we must protect our children fucking move, you know what I mean? All this wave of right-wing content creators that are like gross, creepy perverts who fucking defend child beauty pageants, who defend fucking child brides, for example, say insanely sus shit like, the most fertile a woman is when she's 16 years old. Like, those fucking freakazoids are also the same freakazoids who are like, oh yeah, we gotta protect our children from like, trans people existing.
Though I don't like the whataboutism from wokies trying to use child beauty pageants as a way to own conservatives on child drag shows, when the reality is that both of these things should be illegal. They are both bad for children. So anyway, let's get to the part where the parents wave their kid around to achieve their political goals. A part of this Vice piece talks about a bill in Nebraska that would ban minors from being present at drag shows, and Aaron and the family go to protest that bill.
On that day, it was just going to be the two of us speaking. He did want to come and he did want to wear his fancy new dress that he had just gotten.
Your son wanted to go to the meeting? Yeah, right. I can just imagine him saying, you know what, Dad? I would love to sit through a 4-hour council meeting. Forget how inappropriate it is to use your child to push your politics, because there is no way a 6-year-old is volunteering to go to a government meeting.
Jen got her turn to speak. I got my turn to speak. Asa turned to me and whispered in my ear, can I sit in the chair and speak too? And I said, yes, you can. And he said, yeah, I do want to speak, but can you sit next to me? And I said, that's not a problem. I'm sure they will allow that. I knew that I had to give him some questions.
I knew he wouldn't produce a testimony good enough to impress people, so I had to prompt him with questions to make him sound better. Is it really Asa speaking, or is it just you trying to get a child to say what you want him to say? I'll note that Asa didn't speak until 3 hours into the meeting, and he was prompted by his dad the entire time he spoke. Also, I don't know if this is how the parents framed it or it's how Vice edited the video, but from their statements and from what was shown, you would conclude that Mom spoke, then Dad spoke, then Asa asked to speak because he was inspired by his parents. What actually happened is that Asa spoke first, then his mom right after, and then his dad like 30 minutes later. This framing from the documentary suggests that they were kind of trying to make a spectacle of Asa's speech, and Vice tried to hide that by making people think his parents spoke before he did. They're taking advantage of people's ignorance here. As for the actual meeting, I did happen to sit through the whole thing, and while there were many people who opposed the anti-drag bill who said completely ridiculous crap, the most reasonable concern was that the bill was just too broadly worded and could make any instance of performance in front of minors with clothing that does not represent your biological sex as illegal, like, say, a school play where a girl dresses as Peter Pan. I did read the bill, and I do agree that it's too vague and should be reworded to go after what is actually the problem, which are the very many cases of sexualized performances that have been filmed occurring in front of children. I have serious doubts that parents like Aaron and Jenn don't know about these performances, considering that they cited Libs of TikTok during the Vice documentary, and Libs of TikTok has shown a lot of evidence of inappropriate drag happening in front of kids.
There is indecent drag, but it doesn't happen in front of children.
It's not like, surprise, there's kids in the front row now.
I actually watched a lot of the opposers of the bill deny these performances existing, even though they are on camera and well known.
There's nothing inherently sexual about drag.
There's nothing sexual about it.
Sometimes we push the limits, but those are not shows where minors are present.
Children are generally not present at drag shows hosted in bars.
There's nothing inherently sexual about dress. There's nothing inherently sexual about clothes.
I really don't see why we can't all agree that performances like these are wrong, no matter what ideological team you're on. Now that the nuance of this has been explained, I still find it appalling that Asa's parents had him testify at this hearing. Personally, I would take any testimony from a child with a grain of salt, because we don't know what's going on in the home that led to this behavior. Even victims of extreme abuse, such as this one from the We're All Insane podcast, will avidly defend their abusers while they're being abused, and even promote their abuser's ideology, only to realize how awful the situation was years later. I'm not saying this is happening to Asa, but it is very easy to coach, manipulate, or coerce a kid into saying what you want them to say, and that's why children should not be involved in politics, especially young children like a 6-year-old. And certainly, these parents have no problem with lying or distorting the truth multiple times during the documentary, like this moment here.
I knew that I had to give him some questions. I said, how does drag make you feel? He went to that mic and he said, how does it make you feel?
Powerful. Powerful.
When he said powerful to me, that was like, whew, the weight of that word just hit me so hard, because I still wasn't sure where I was at with performing drag at that point.
Yeah, that's actually a lie. You knew exactly where you were with Asa performing drag because you pretty insistently claimed that you would make sure that Asa does drag, whether this bill passes or not.
If this bill were to pass, we will not stop allowing him to dance in a dress in our home. He has performed already in other states. He will continue to perform in other states. He will continue to perform in Lincoln and Omaha as long as he is allowed to legally. We want him to be the most affirmed child that he can be.
Someone might point out that he spoke after Asa, and those words could have been inspired by what Asa said. To that, I'll say, remember that they or Vice tried to hide the fact that Asa spoke first. Second, you can see he's reading off a printed out script. Actually, both him and his wife read off a script, so he already planned to say that stuff. Here's them distorting the truth again.
It really is no different than anything that happens at a dance recital.
Yes, because at a dance recital, kids commonly have dollar bills given to them by the audience. Personally, I can think of only one other place where that kind of activity occurs. And if you think that's the only time this kid has been given money for drag, you'd be wrong. Here's another example. There's one here too, and here's one more. Being that money is involved, how do we know that this kid isn't being heavily driven to do these performances because he's getting a bonus in his allowance? Even so, we all know it's being mimicked here, and what part of this is child-friendly?
We get told a lot from performers and people in the community that people do kind of see Lulu as hope of what's to come for the future in the community.
Well, considering the material, the people who have that take probably need to spend some time behind bars. But it's not like this is all a new thing. Boundaries around children have been pretty poorly protected throughout the ages. You think stuff like creeps at Nickelodeon using LGBT as a disguise to expose children to inappropriate stuff is new? No, these companies have been doing that stuff for years. Have you ever investigated why the logo for Nickelodeon used to be a foot, or why there were a number of gags on kids shows that involved kids playing with their feet? Well, one of the higher-ups at that company, Dan Schneider, had a foot fetish, so if you didn't already know that, you're welcome for ruining your childhood. Speaking of iCarly, this actor in this kissing scene is 23, while Miranda Cosgrove is 16. How about Zoe 101? Here Victoria Justice is 14, and the actor she's doing the kissing scene with is either 20 or 21, depending on when they filmed the episode, because the episode was filmed around his birthday. Who in the hell thought this was appropriate? And remember, they shoot these scenes a ton of times with a crew of adults watching and giving direction. This whole thing begs the question of, if there are thousands of people trying out for these roles, then what's the issue with just finding actors who are the same or close in age? Or just don't do the scenes at all? It's no wonder people like Hannah Pearl Davis have these weird boundaries when it comes to minors. The sad thing is that though this stuff you see involving kids on libs of TikTok is bad, personally, it's not even the thing I'm most concerned about when it comes to protecting children. I think a big part of the reason that so many people can roll their eyes at this stuff, ignore it, or outright support it is because the next thing they're thinking is, well, look at what kids have access to on their computer and their phones. This was a comment that was said quite a lot during the recent Twitch event where they allowed artistic nudity, which basically turned it into a camgirl site within a few hours, and a place where people were drawing full-on pornography and titling their videos as if they were on the internet's favorite adult hub website. Let's keep in mind that Twitch is a website where they play games like Fortnite, Among Us, or Fall Guys, which are all games that young children play. Considering that the just chatting section is the most popular category, those kids are just one accidental click away from being exposed to adult content without even having to click on a box that says, "Are you 18?" During the time period when artistic nudity was allowed, there was inappropriate content uncensored right in the thumbnails. These are viewable without clicking any form of age verification or consent, and you don't even have to be logged in. By the way, these inappropriate thumbnails can still currently be found on Twitch in the Just Chatting section, as well as the Art section, which still has a lot of people drawing lewd content. Basically, there are always multiple creators drawing hentai in the Art section of a website that children use, and those artists aren't always drawing characters that are adults. But it's okay because most of the time, the girls technically have clothes on. Not that it even matters, because you can simply just click yes to the "Are you 18?" question and proceed to view the content. You don't even have to log in. Yes, I'm aware that you're supposed to be 13 to be on Twitch, but considering that they don't require you to sign in for even the most restricted parts of the website, you know that plenty of kids that are far younger than that are on Twitch because children's games are being streamed. The fact that no one went to prison for artistic nudity on Twitch just baffles me, because if that was done in a public square, you would have been locked up and put on a registry for a number of years. Yet if it happens on the internet, it's totally fine. And people say, what about the parents? It's the parents' responsibility to keep their kids away from this stuff. And to that I say, it's so easy to access adult content on every avenue, even with parental controls, that I honestly don't think it's possible for even the most vigilant parents to keep their kids from being exposed to it. Unless you, isolate your kids from the rest of society.
Personally, I was exposed to adult content when I was 8 years old at a friend's house. And it's something my parents would have never been okay with. I did not have a smartphone. They did everything they could to protect me from that sort of thing.
To put this in terms of a metaphor, access to internet pornography is like this. Imagine if you put a lemonade stand next to a middle school that was full of free, unlimited beer. No one is at the stand to check your age. You can get the free beer at any time of the day, be it 12 p.m. or 4 in the morning, and the only thing you have to do to take the beer is check a box on a clipboard that says yes when it asks you if you're 21. And sometimes you don't even have to do that. If this was the case with beer, don't you think a lot of kids, if not pretty much every kid, would have access to alcohol far before the age of consent? And that's not even a fully accurate metaphor, because adult content is much easier to access than that. That being said, it's no wonder that porn addiction is such a common subject of discussion these days. Which brings us to this video here by Gerbert Johnson. I'm not super familiar with this channel, but I believe he's a nofap/blackpill YouTuber. Don't quote me on that though. We actually aren't going to watch the video. We're just here for the comments. Looking through these, it's shocking how many people were exposed to adult material at 10 or younger. Actually, I believe it was every comment I read where they gave an age. This one says, I was a 9-year-old girl when I first began watching it. Looking back, I realized that I had an addiction by the age of 10. Here's another that says, I'm 28 and I was exposed to hardcore graphic stuff when I was 10. And last, even as a woman, I struggle with this. I still remember the first video that I watched at around 7 or 8 years old. There were actually a shocking number of women in this comment section. I expected it to be mostly men, but contrary to the popular counter-argument of, you have no idea what 13-year-olds have access to on the internet these days, it's actually not 13-year-olds. It's 7, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds getting access to this material, and none of the mainstream companies are doing anything to stop it. You have Pornhub here that didn't even age verify their actresses until like 3 years ago, after massive pushback, and had to remove 80% of their content because a lot of it was illegal. Even still, in the Art and Young Project Veritas style expose, they admitted that you could just bypass that by showing someone else's ID and then not showing your face in your videos, so I'm sure trafficking is still rampant on that website.
The most shocking thing, and honestly the first thing that I recorded, was Mike Farley telling me about this upload loophole where the content reviewers internally at the company find it absolutely impossible, because it is impossible, to match a face on an ID to a body in a video, because many videos don't contain faces at all. So there's a lot of guesswork and, just push it through, it looks about right, where really you don't know if someone's 14, 16, 20. Many times you can't tell. So when Mike Farley started talking about that loophole, I was shocked. And not only that, but the fact that he said it was enough of an issue to him that he sat down and recorded a meeting of him telling the executives about this loophole, and he was told to F off and shut up about it.
If you want to hate that website, then you can just watch the people who run it getting surprise interviewed. And yes, they admitted to wanting kids to watch the website. But it's not just the hub that's the problem. The world's most popular search engine, Google, doesn't even require you to log in before you turn Safe Search off. Of course, there are still ways for a kid to get access to explicit material, even if they're logged in, but the whole idea is to make accessing the content as difficult as possible. This is a principle in marketing. The more difficult it is to buy your product, the less people will consume it. It's also why politicians fight so hard to be put on the ballot, because while yes, you can just write the person's name in, having to do that extra step when it comes to a population of millions makes it so you'll basically never win an election. The more you have to teach a person to make it possible to engage with you, the fewer people you'll get when it comes to large-scale groups, which in terms of what we're talking about here, it could mean that simply requiring a login before Safe Search can be deactivated could save hundreds of thousands of 7-year-olds from being exposed to adult content. Since the age to view adult content is 18, the goal is to implement a system that makes it so kids are as close to that age as possible before they are first exposed to the material. Obviously, that number will never be 100%, but a person viewing adult content for the first time at 16 is not nearly as bad as seeing it for the first time at 7. With that said, the protections for children against this stuff are dismal, and while plenty of people are outraged about this online, nobody is really willing to take actual steps to make it harder for kids to get access to this content. Except Utah. They signed in a law that requires ID verification to access adult content in their state. Personally, I think that's a step in the right direction. However, the methods of ID verification that they proposed look like they were written by boomers and either require expensive software with dubious accuracy, or they require you to reveal a ton of personal information to some of the biggest degenerates on the planet. Refer back to the Art and Young interviews for the kinds of people who run adult websites, or note that since the beginning of the internet, adult websites have been riddled with spyware and viruses designed to steal people's info to commit identity theft. Jeez, one of these says that you put in your social security number to age verify. Are you kidding me? If you do that, then scammers are just going to design an ad that looks like the spot that you're supposed to age verify in, and instead of asking for the last 4 digits, they'll trick people into giving out the whole thing. The identity theft business is going to be booming. Not to mention that the government will probably use this as an excuse to implement a system that will connect your real-life identity to your internet use, and then that can be used to destroy anonymity and free speech. So all this is not a great plan. This is why you don't allow boomers who don't know how Wi-Fi works to make laws about the internet. Also, if you start attaching people's ID to their internet history, a lot of people will resist societal changes that protect children because they don't want people knowing what sites they visit. So here's how we actually solve this problem. We can do ID verification for websites in person. All you have to do is sell it in the form of something like a gift card at places like liquor stores. You show your ID to the store clerk, buy the card or cards for $1 each, make an account for the website, put the code in, and now you are age verified. Also, the cards are single use, so some kid can't just steal one out of his dad's wallet and pass it around at school. Plus, it being single use would limit exposure in the case that a minor does get one, because you would only have access to one account on one website instead of every website, along with things like Google search. Yes, you should have to age verify to turn off safe search and view age-restricted content on search engines. Last, single-use cards make it more difficult for porn addicts to relapse, because if they revoke their ID verification or delete their accounts, they now have to drive to the store and enter codes for every website they used to use, instead of being able to access adult websites instantly anytime they have an impulse. But the whole point of this is that it's very simple, it's anonymous, and if it were implemented, the numbers of kids getting access to adult websites would plummet. Are there ways around this? Yes, but it's far better than what we have going right now, which is basically zero protection. It's time to start actually taking steps to keep children from getting access to content they shouldn't be seeing, instead of just saying it's wrong on social media and then forgetting about it. Anyway, thanks for watching, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.